and he's a teacher, 7th grade at Hamburg Middle. And his son, right, Abra?
How you doing?
And they both love this stuff. I reached out by email to Jason because I got his name from someone who said, yeah, he knows a lot about this kind of thing.
No pressure.
No pressure. I explained to these fellas what we've been doing, trying to go through a lot of this chronologically, and also, with some stuff that we're inserting along the way. Several of you have sessions upcoming that you're going to contribute. Meet me afterwards if you're one of those guys, because it's time to start getting on the actual calendar. Mark, right? Yeah, you and Mark, and you're doing something.
Hell no. I can't speak in front of people.
No, you're fine. What I gave you has nothing to do with today per se, but I wanted to just quickly remind you where we're at in the timeline, and then proceed with these fellas. We talked about everything before Lexington and Concord, what led up to it, and then this is just the outline of the battles. Lexington, Concord, 75, Bunker Hill 2 months after that. 76, we get into Battle of Brooklyn, Long Island, and so forth. We have the Battle of Trenton coming up, crossing into Delaware. That's going to be a very exciting thing. Jake is going to lead that. Jacob back there. He's been working on it, and I expect big things. He's been working on it for. Come on, Rick. Shh. Okay. Governor Pence.
Wow.
Governor Pence in the house, everybody.
In front of everybody? In front of everybody, really?
But this will give you an idea of what we have coming up in terms of big battles that we go through. Princeton, Brandywine, Germantown, a lot of stuff. Right? We didn't even get on the back page yet. So take a look at that. You should probably bring that to both sessions. So I'm going to leave it to these fellas now. They have the presentation is on tactics and weapons. Should be exciting. Talking about the Continental Army / militia, and then the British forces. And did you get the Ken Burns thing? Turned up? Okay. So, guys, hey, give us your attention and give a round of applause, and these guys will.
My name is Jason Steinagel. It's my son Gabriel. We're going to introduce ourselves a little bit. If you can't hear us, let us know and we'll give it to the microphones, but I think we prefer not to use the mics.
We won't be able to hear you.
What?
We won't be able to hear you.
Use the mic.
Don't use the
We
mic?
got fans and stuff going back there that can't hear.
You see the average age of these people? Come on.
Wow.
Sorry about that. Yeah. Your mouth up to it.
Full of shit, too.
So today, Gabriel and I are going to be sharing the end of the revolution. We're going to go through several aspects of the war, from citizen soldiers up through the equipment that they used, even the technology that was available, and even some of the battles and the strategies, and how they used different tactics to their advantage, especially the American side. Okay? Then later, Gabriel, you want to explain a little bit about, just give a preview of what's going to happen later? Yes, yeah.
So toward the end, we're going to have, if you guys would like, we can have a volunteer reenactment of actually how the smoothbore rifles of the British faced against the rifle ammunition of the Americans, which helped us win the war. We brought some different Commonwealth papers if you just want to practice and have some fun. It's paper balls that mimic the smoothbore, and then paper airplanes that mimic the rifle action, show how the scatter shots or accuracy won or lost the different sides of the war.
Well, hopefully we'll have fun. Yes, sir.
You gotta hold the mics a little closer.
Okay, a little closer?
Perfect, thank you.
Thank you. All right, appreciate your help. My name is Jason Steinagel. I was Nuggets' Body Doubles and Patriot. I'm there season 3.
Wow.
Okay.
Bulked up a little bit.
I love Photoshop. Great. I'm a Hammond Middle School teacher. I really American history from geography, Native American culture up through with the Civil War and Reconstruction. And for me, I really enjoy the 12-year-olds because they're moving into adulthood. They're kids, they want to please you, but then they also do keep their thoughts with them so you can shape what they're going to be as adults. I think it's our responsibility as teachers to help them become better people like you. I mean, the tests are great, and the essays are awesome, presentations are fantastic, but wanting them to be better people. And social studies, especially early American history, when we decide to settle here, we decide to fight the British, fight ourselves eventually, we actually then, I think, have a more of an understanding, lessons that can be learned to these younger generation, next generation of leaders. So it's a lot of fun to do that. Gabriel.
Again, my name is Gabriel. I, throughout the years, ever since obviously high school and whatnot, I've been a great mentor to my father. So I've been able to participate in different naturalization ceremonies, nationalization ceremonies. He's also been National Archive projects been a part of, and also Living History Days. Where in the top photo, we actually had different groups that were voluntary from Canada and around New York actually come in and showcase the Revolutionary War, where we can develop units, cannon fire. So history's in my blood, and I always enjoy sharing with the community as well.
As we do the presentation, please let us know if you have questions. Citizen soldiers. Obviously, the American Revolution was founded with citizen soldiers and their efforts and sacrifices. That wasn't unique to this war. It was also obviously at War 1812, Civil War as well, and all through to modern day. So we'll start with this one.
So I'll start with the British portion. We're looking at the armies and how they were organized in 1775. At this point, England had a formalized army for about 150 years, which is 1600s. And looking at their men, they generally were Navy-based. They tried to use a lot of Navy tactics, warships, and naval tactics in the ocean, trade routes, and also looking at the colonial colonies and different trade routes. It wasn't as important. So their army at this time was very small. It was only 48,000 men at this time. Generally, they thought the Americans were not going to identify the Americans and break away. They just finished the 7 Years' War against France. So they had more of a peacetime army. They also thought it was expensive to maintain 2 full-time armies. So looking again, before we had a full Revolutionary War, there were not as many British soldiers as we would expect at that time for a war.
Thanks for sharing. Federal forces are much different. The state militias established by the after the French and Indian War, they wanted to avoid paying regular soldiers. So part-time soldiers, teachers like us, doctors, ministers, farmers, people on the dock, they actually were the regular soldiers, just part-time, to save some money. Allegations for all males. If you were age 16 to 45, you were legally required at the time to serve and maintain their own personal arms and equipment. So we wouldn't have even an arsenal, okay, sharing weapons at this time. It was actually people bringing their own weapons home. They were hunters, they were frontiersmen, they were bringing their guns with them to the army. This makes the army more personal too, because throughout the war, you ignore someone in the battlefield. If it's your home behind you, down the river or over the hill, you'll be much more stubborn, and you'll be less likely to retreat. If you're a professional soldier, far away from home, and you're just doing it for the money, because you're doing drills, that's a different kind of mentality. So that's one of our advantages of the Continental Forces. And it really was just an ad hoc army. We didn't really have formal, regular armed forces. It was set by the Second Continental Congress at Lexington, Concord when the need was there. So this army grew out of necessity. It wasn't actually a presence. The army of the British were secondary priority to the Navy, because obviously it's an island nation with many colonies across the ocean. So the American forces were much different makeup, not only in professionalism, but also mentality as well. It was just a different atmosphere for the Continental soldiers. Yes, sir. Yeah.
You say that they were legally required to serve. Is that where it was that? Town by town, pretty much?
Yes.
State by state? What?
Yes, town by town organized different regiments, and then the states would send them and they request to the Congress. Something, I mean, interesting, like when the war first came out, so this was only a month. And Washington said, "What are you doing? You need to make it 6 months in place. You got to make it at least a couple of years, because as you train them and you have one battle, then they get to go home. It makes no sense at all. So eventually, to term, bless you, was actually a lot longer called the war. That was one thing, but the turnover was very, very quick at the beginning of the war. That's a good question. And please keep those questions coming too. If you have anything you want to add or ask, please let us know. Okay? Anything else, Gabriel, for this slide? Okay? Soldier profile. Me again?
So we're gonna divide it, I'll take the continental soldier and then Jason will take the British regular perspective, so we're gonna take demographics first.
So the British regular soldiers were very young men. Early 20s, they were drawn to the British in Ireland, and they were conscripts, and actually being a soldier was not the best job to have, especially being stationed overseas. Young men, probably without families. They unemployed farm labormen or tradesmen, and they wanted to escape poverty. It was a job for them. They wanted to get out of what they were doing, have a new life. The Army promised steady pay and also regular meals. Experience level, they became better soldiers. They were mostly unseasoned volunteers. They're not battle hardened until they actually got into conflict with the French and later with the Americans. So non-commissioned officers really had decades of service and were the backbone, and that's where the drill, discipline, and those mentalities of the British Army came from. Those officers moved to the ranks, so those career men later became the foundation for mentality. Essentially, the British soldier, once you volunteered, you were there for life, okay? And it was just several years after the war, independence was over, just to encourage recruitment. They realized that having people sign up for their entire life, going across the ocean, fighting Americans, a very unpopular, expensive war, was not the best way to recruit new soldiers. So they offered a shorter recruitment time. Okay?
So the continental soldier is profoundly different. You have young men, teenagers from 15 to 20 now fighting because you need any man, next man up to fight. Whether it's someone coming from Europe directly who's an immigrant who now became an American, identifies with the American life and wants that freedom, trying to get out of the British oppression. So you have sons, husbands, fathers, you have many seasoned farmers, merchants, mechanics, people who are usually tradesmen. Now they're picking up weapons rather than maybe hunting. Some people might have some rifle experience. That's nothing compared to the British, which had full-on war soldiers, such as the 7 Years' War. Many of those soldiers stayed in the Americas and were very well trained against a profound, more experienced fighting force. Okay, the pay was about $6, which back then is a lot more money compared to today. But still back then that would provide for at least the months help their families. A lot of times, as the war went on, they would light up on money and whatnot. The soldiers actually would later on fight for the country rather than the payments, which was a testament to our American ideals. And you have citizens again tying into military experience. You have farmers or huntsmen, so having the rifles and being more of a sharpshooter will help later on. But initially, you have again 15 to 30-year-olds first time taking up a weapon against the experienced British soldier. It's not going to go well generally, so you would need a lot more training. So as Jason was saying, it went from 1 year to 3 years with the enlistments, because once you train these men, it takes a long time. Later, we'll talk about the French that helped us. But initially, with all this different fighting, it was pretty much a miracle that we had farmers, people who were picking up all these different tools and axes in the mines to now pick up rifles against the British Army.
Any questions? Yeah,
I'm sorry,
No.
guys, you guys can ask questions too.
please do.
It's fascinating to me. So, you're talking about the Continental soldiers, so someone who's enlisted, right?
Or
As
volunteer.
opposed to the militia,
Or volunteer.
or volunteer.
Yeah.
Does that include the militia?
Yes.
Okay. Is there a percentage of people who were actually enlisted versus militia?
About half. In other words, some people actually were militias that had volunteered early, and they stayed with Washington and the Army throughout the entire war. Others had been recruited, and they also stayed. Some obviously deserted, some were lost on the battlefield too, so about half of the ones
They're
that
still here, hard hearing.
Oh, sorry, okay. About half.
There you go.
Yeah.
There you go again.
I don't like to sound my voice, it's just my own issues, yeah.
Since we were new at the time, what did they use to back that money up? They paid
They did.
paper money with what, nothing.
Right, exactly. So America, that's a good question. So America was starting out in American money, they didn't actually have it at first. And as it was one of the issues that the Continental soldiers had is at the end of the war, they were not paid at all. And they were so aggravated, even, property was stolen at home, most of them came back, they weren't welcomed, essentially, because they thought they were going to be hanged for treason, and they were going to lose the war. So the stuff was taken from them, families were scattered, and the soldiers actually said, General Washington, please give us the order when marching New York City at the time, and we're going to put you as a dictator. So, yeah, that was a big issue for the Patriot soldiers. They were not paid for the most part, and they were not treated well at the end of the war because people in their towns didn't think they'd come back. So, yeah, it was a big issue. And thankfully, Washington, first time in history, when the dictator puts down rebellion, usually they take absolute power, like Napoleon, for example, in France. He had the opportunity not only to become a dictator, but he also had the opportunity to become a monarch. So this is way off the topic here, but the soldiers said, give us the order, we'll march, put you in charge. He said, put your guns down, go home, we'll figure this out. They also call him King George. Okay, as they were figuring out the Constitution, the Articles of Confederation were failures. They were used to monarchies. This is succession. There's no issue about change in leadership. So having King George was not unusual, but again, he said no thank you. So on 2 different occasions, he said no to absolute power, which makes him a very great man. Obviously, he's a slaveholder. There's always a dark side to this. But yeah, it's very interesting that not too many people will be offered absolute power to himself and his children and say no thank you. So it's off topic, but thank you for the question. Yes, sir.
So I'm a big sound money guy. So if they were paid in silver or gold at $6.23 per month,
Yeah,
on average, they were paid about $400 in today's money.
yeah. I'm gonna trust you. I have no idea.
Yeah.
But I'm just letting you know. Yeah,
It's like $350 if they're paid silver, or $450 if they're paid gold.
Yeah.
How you look at it.
I thank you for that. I didn't realize that. They weren't paid at all, honestly.
Well,
Yeah, the shortages were there. The kind of money was worthless. They were bartering, for any kind of medicine, supplies they could get from any other, like France.
but either way, $400 a month is.
Yes.
That's,
There were instances too where wealthy businessmen who did support the American agenda did actually support the U.S. Treasury. It wasn't a treasury officially, but there were many voluntarily had the wealth and finance our armies behind closed doors. There's that aspect as well.
Yeah, that's a good point. Yeah, the money had come from somewhere, it's from civilians, not the actual government. That's a good point here. Any more questions? Okay.
So looking at the manpower crisis again, briefly discussed how the Army was much smaller on land. They focused again on naval affairs and warships and where their money went. So to compensate for this lack of recruitment of soldiers in the British Army, they had to outsource their men. So they went to the Hessians in the German area, and they had loyal recruits, so people, the Americans who still were loyalists, they would be able to obviously join the British Army in certain cases, if safe, engage in certain battles. And there's also the failed impressment aspect where it just didn't work, but they would want unemployment, fight, they had no motivation, so they would not continue fighting for the British when there's nothing for them to gain. Looking at this too, we're going to look at different Scottish regiments as well, later videos, and how the British again tried to compensate for the loss of probably again half of their men who became Americans, and then it cost them in the long run.
So back to your question too, about the militia supplements. If it wasn't for the militia, there would be a regular army. So the militia, both the Loyalists and Patriots, they actually quickly called up temporarily supplement the regular army during regional campaigns. So if they were traveling through Virginia, for example, the Continental Army would calling up for local militia from Virginia. Okay, so that was critical for Washington. And those are bounty system too. So Congress enticed recruits with escalating bounties, money for hire essentially, additional money, extra clothing, post-war land grants, what's the Mississippi River, and land gives you power, obviously, good land, farmland, also leads to statehood, so that's economic power. So that bounty system was also very, very influential too, for getting people motivated and inspired to fight for the country. Some actually were patriots, so really wanted to fight against England and become a federal country. So the bounty system was very particular group of people who were looking for land and money after the war was over to survive. Questions?
I can't believe that number. I never thought of that. 25,000 approximately Americans?
Yes, yeah.
What? For Britain?
Yes.
Well, it was also a lot of British citizens who did not see themselves as Americans. They didn't also
Yeah,
join
yeah, I know,
So they
yeah.
would try to flee to Canada if they could, especially down south. They would join the British to keep the lands they had, because they knew there was some land prospects, farming and whatnot. So for them, maybe moving to Canada and finding a safer British haven, that was the best option.
You kind of wonder how many flip-flopped. I mean, how many loyalists jumped to the colonials jumped to the loyalists.
Yeah, even families were split. Van Franklin was a fantastic example. His son was a royal governor in New Jersey. And to your point, you know, the loyalists, they got their power from Great Britain, whether it was land, whether it was politics, whatever their power source was, they didn't want to leave that. So in big cities like New York City, for example, and way down the south, especially the south, they would pride themselves on being British in colonial times. It's, again, this is a little off topic, but it's great to know that some fashion styles in Williamsburg, Virginia, were actually received fashion in some parts of England. So the bustle of a lady or the carriage style of a gentleman, they pride themselves on being British. They were Anglican, they sing the same songs, they worship the same God, they dance the same way as England. So loyalists in the South were predominant because they modeled British culture since colonial times. It was difficult for them to separate and see themselves as American. So that's why we talk about the successful Southern campaign for the British, partly because the loyalists were there helping the British. Any questions? Okay. This is me or you? Me? Okay. So moving from the soldiers now to the actual hierarchy of officers who are usually from the upper class, getting rank and privilege, non-inheritance rank, okay, from well-to-do families. So if your father was a general, it doesn't mean you're going to be a general too, just to let you know. The Corps was highly experienced. So the British Army and Navy had so much experience. The officers, they knew how to fight in traditional styles. And that's actually what got them in trouble with Americans, because they were still stuck on their tactics, shoulder to shoulder, long lines, facing to face. You fire, we fire, you fire, we fire, whoever runs away loses. And that's one of the downsides. They weren't able to adapt. They were so ingrained in the drill and the gentleman warfare that they just didn't see another option. 65% of the officers about sold the commissions to the next senior officer. So if the colonel retired, the next man up would be sold that rank for the regiment. The bond was held by the government, and if dismissed dishonorably, the officer lost the money, financial incentive for good behavior. And there was a death exception too. If he was killed in battle, the commission was filled strictly by seniority without purchase. So if the colonel dies, next one up, captain to become your next colonel. What are the next two? Or is this? Okay. So merit promotion. Artillery and engineers were strict meritocracy based on obviously their bravery in battle, and they have rigid requirements for extensive mathematics and science knowledge. Obviously, building a bridge, you want to make sure that it's technically sound, otherwise people could actually, fall the river. And artillery, they had to know distance, they had to know the arc of the rifles, of the cannons, and distance, so that also be calculated scientifically and mathematically. And with merit promotion, they usually up their ranks. They have exceedingly rare promotions from the pool of senior non-commissioned officers. If you're an officer, you're promoted from the officers corps. There's very little promotion from sergeants to lieutenants. Okay? Or you can do a royal appointment. If the king likes you or your family, you could get a direct appointment as a colonel, which would be favoritism, obviously. Doesn't always lead to good leadership, but it's a good way to move on from Frank's very quickly. You know the team very well. Any questions? Yes, sir.
So, in reference to today's Army, at least here in the States, so if you're a non-commissioned officer, is that where that comes from? Like,
Yes, yeah.
you didn't buy your way into title?
That's what it is, yeah.
I was wondering where that
The non-commissioned officers are the ones who are sergeants, sergeant majors, the ones who are leading other troops, they're not officers. So officers have a lieutenant, go up to general.
you had to buy your title back then?
Yes, yeah. Some meritorious that were killed in battle, there was no reason for payment, but yeah. They actually paid for it. Well, unless you're killed in battle, then you get no choice. Megan? Okay. When you have gentlemen's warfare, and it's long crowd line, shoulder to shoulder, face to face, you fire, we fire, you fire, we fire, whoever runs away loses. This is a general line of battle. Okay? On the left flank, you have light artillery, and you can actually move around the flank. So as you're moving forward in the lines, what they would try to do is they try to envelop or move around your opposing enemy. And so on the ends, on the light infantry with on the left flank, trying to circle on the right side. Their speed, agility, and marksmanship are known and drilled. They skirmish from behind cover, providing reconnaissance and protecting the Army's flanks, making sure they're not going to get flanked themselves. On the right side, the grenadiers, the British. They are the largest and strongest men. The Dragoon officers are one level up. They're like the Navy SEALs, Army Rangers today. They're over 6 feet tall, and they are special forces back then. The Grenadiers are the right flank, though. They're the strongest men, shock troops for assaulting the enemy lines, and they don't actually lob in explosives at this time of the war because they're just too fragile. They're just too delicate. Most explode themselves will hit the enemy. And then between the left and right flank, you've got the hat of battalion companies. They're standard infantry forming the main line of battle, and they have 15 steps to fire the rifles or the muskets more commonly. And this would be a common 642 men battalion in the British moving forward. We tried to model this as Americans, and we could not stand toe to toe with the champ. These men are professionals, and that's why they had to move away from these tactics. Otherwise, Washington would have lost the war.
And again, too, these tactics, the French did try against the British in the 7 Years' War and got slaughtered. So the Americans not trying to stand up against the same force, it was going to go worse if we didn't try to adapt and change our style.
And that was a different thinking because the French didn't believe that they were going to win the war. So, again, it's a little bit off topic, but they wanted us to show that we could win a gentleman's battle, prove that we actually were worthy of investment. And Saratoga was that turning point. I think it's one of the battles on the list here. But Saratoga is one of the battles we actually fought face to face, shoulder to shoulder, and we beat the British. So that's one way, the turning point in the war. The French, oh, you guys can do it. You guys actually win. That's pretty cool. Here's some stuff. Okay, not going to be a bad investment. So once we proved that we could actually beat the British in this traditional men's conflict, then we actually got the help of the British, of the French.
Were any of the battles during the French and Indian War fought in this way?
All of them. I think I can tell them, but yeah, most of
So
them.
guys like Washington, guys who actually, they had this
Yes.
experience at least.
That's, yeah, they knew the other team's game plan. Washington fought as a colonel under General Bradford before he was wounded. But yeah, so Washington knew the team's game plan. It's like watching, the other team for football on Sunday, So yes, we knew exactly how they were going to respond. And,
Washington preferred this style fight.
no, he did at the beginning, but then he realized it was a lost cause. Yeah, then he switched. And actually, his officers, were questioning him. How can we hide behind rocks and trees? How can we use this new technology and actually identify the officer across the battlefield with a sniper rifle and take him out? So there was a lot of contention. When Washington shifted strategy and tactics, his officers were not solid. Let's go. They were like, wait, hold on, we got to do this as gentlemen, because they were, thinking that way for hundreds of years. So Washington had to change some minds. When they started winning some victories, then people started to embrace these ideas more. Yep.
So on the left, you're right.
Louis, you gotta speak up.
On the left, you're right. To avoid getting flanked, and I would take out the whole left side, so they can't get around you, so everybody here is coming at you. You don't have to worry about being flanked.
Yeah.
Did they use that stress?
We're gonna talk about that. Bell Calvins. I want to give away some of their art. That's a good question. So we knew how the British were going to respond. We knew how they're going to try to outflank us on the left side, and you'll see our American general how he responded to that. And kind of, I don't want to spoil it. But yes, it's part of it. Okay, yeah. So we knew how they were going to think. The Battle of Calvins is one strategy, one battle that we actually used our knowledge of their tactics to their advantage. Okay.
Good
You're
question,
great
Lou.
setup. Yeah, great setup, man.
Yeah,
That's
Lou.
right stuff.
All right,
Well,
Lou.
and I do this,
Yeah, okay.
they were reserves, so we also have reserve units, which we'll talk about that.
Yeah.
But that's how they would counter it, so it's like a chess match, we have something in the reserves, depending how you react, if we win or lose things, we're going to then use that reserve to go. So we'll talk about this in a second.
There's also horsemen involved. This is just an infantry. So we also have horsemen involved in the battle. So yeah, there's all kinds of different roles, responsibilities, and tactics. All right. Again. The British Army had a colonel as administrative head. Usually they didn't fight or get involved in the battle, but they had field officers, major lieutenant colonels. They held 3 companies, not led by captains in different field operations. Captains had about 7 out of 10 companies. Lieutenants were in charge of the regiments, and then ensigns were second lieutenants and flag companies on the outside. The colonel served in the field with a specific regiment, given the wide discretion over the outfitting, uniforms, and training. They were directly involved with the quartermaster to make sure that they were well fed and well supplied. There was also the colonel was a function of a collection of individually managed regiments rather than one simple top-down reality. So they were involved in so many different field officers to help streamline facilitation of supplies and equipment. Okay? They were dual hats. The colonels were often elevated to generals on campaigns, like Lord Cornwallis was general in the South, but colonel for the 33rd Regiment. So as the colonel had more responsibility, their rank also would improve as well. So the general decided, General Howe, for example, decided to separate his men. The colonel was now going to be elevated to a general because he had to manage more soldiers. He was on his own.
Yeah,
Got more than 10. Oh, yeah.
What's that?
Yes.
Say, we can't hear you guys back
I'm
here.
sorry.
Can you hold the microphone right up?
Right up here? Okay, gotcha. Thank you. So the colonel was actually involved with so many different details in supplying a lot of different companies, okay? So the brigades are 2 to 4 regiments grouped together under a temporary brigadier. And divisions were multiple brigades grouped together based on strictly wartime need. So as the divisions were separated from New York City to the south, for example, or north of Saratoga, they were involved with the colonels who eventually became generals. Okay?
In Washington too, during the 7 Years' War, was a colonel for the British who actually did start the 7 Years' War. So he was also part of that campaign.
So in Washington, used this knowledge to his advantage several times throughout the battle. Okay? See what I mean? Okay.
So other than the weight of war, there was literally the weight that men had to carry in addition to their weapons. You had their backpack, so that in supplies here, you would have to have certain, they would say a knapsack, or you have the haversack. So whatever they had on them, or they had to take somebody who possibly died beside them, they would try to have any gear they could. So there wasn't obviously the sanitary conditions. You have obviously boiled water, the tin cups were important. You have coffee grounds sorted to be considered coffee. You consider too spoons and whatnot, whatever game of meat was around. You didn't have cracker rations from Congress, so you were very limited in your supplies and what you had access to. Personal items, looking at that, people would generally try to write to their loved ones. Obviously, when you're on the front lines, where there's no daily scrimmages and in battles. They would try to obviously have some downtime by writing. So penmanship, journals, that type of material was often in their knapsacks as well, especially if they fell. A lot of ways to identify men, possibly if there was ever a gruesome injury, you could always look at their journal. And obviously you have the weaponry. One interesting thing too with the bayonet, generally it's for defense. And looking at how offensively the Americans would use, again, the guerrilla style warfare we're talking about, where the bayonet was more of an offensive weapon that helped turn the tide.
A couple things too, I want to add to the slide, that war was fantasized, obviously, with Thomas Paine's Common Sense. We have people excited about fighting in the war. But even in today's Army, Navy, most of it's very, very boring, just drilling routine, digging latrines back then, clearing fields, working fortifications, that's the reality. So you don't spend a lot of time fighting. Most of your time is marching, getting a certain spot and carrying weight, and then build fortifications, latrines, making sure everyone's healthy and sanitary with that. So the romance of war does not correspond with the actual reality of war. As I don't think people have in service today, but veterans I've talked to, it's very similar to that situation where there's not a lot of action going on, just a lot of routine and drill.
Hey guys, there's a lot of back talk, it's hard to hear with all the
How far
people
were those
chatting.
things shooting?
The rifle could be about 600 yards, and the musket ball probably accurate with about 100 yards. So again, it's volume. And just another side note, if you're a hunter, you have what they call a short start, a deer antler with a piece of wood, and you would kind of stuff it in there as hard as you can, because again, we'll have this later, when the ball bounces down the smooth barrel, it flies everywhere. So if you're a hunter, you got a short start, and basically one shot, one kill, it's got to be more accurate, there's no bouncing. Otherwise, you're going to be able to eat. Then go to tops or federal, get your steak for the evening. With soldier, it's volume fire. If I can fire more than you can, then I'm going to win the battle. Okay, that's part of the drill. So it's just slam it down, aim and fire, slam it down, aim and fire, go through the drill, and then practice is 8 hours a day doing that. And we have next slides that talk about the different rifles and how much you can fire a minute. But that's volume fire. So hunters would try to pack it down as tightly as they can, and soldiers, they would just volume. Shoulder to shoulder, long lines. We're going to end up doing a demonstration between, across the room here. But you'll see how inaccurate the smooth bore was, because the ball just kind of bounces. Yes, sir.
That's why they want to outlaw 30-round magazines.
Why is that?
Volume of fire.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Okay.
And also just it's important, looking at the geography, the British weren't used to cold, frigid days. We look at small details like a blanket. In our weather geography, we would be more prepared for these cold nights. We try to avoid disease and freezing to death. So British, in these cases, if they didn't have blankets or whatnot, or instilled from fallen Americans, would be unprepared for the weather as well, because they're used to the rain in certain British weather. So going back, looking at the smooth bore again, as Jason was talking about, again, when you fire a round ball, you pack it in, it would rattle around this huge long nozzle, and you'd fire out, and you just hope that you were close enough, and it was accurate enough to hit somebody, if anywhere whatsoever. At least injuring somebody would be at least a target for the man firing. So again, you have the British round vests, they weren't American-made smooth bore weapons, not as much, because we obviously were British. For Americans, we had many British-made models. Later, when the French had better weapons, they joined the war. We also had the French-style weapons. And looking at combat, the fast reload shots, that was the difference again, going back to the farmers versus the experienced British. How fast could you fire? Could you fire 4 times in a minute compared to a farmer who just picked up a weapon a month ago and he's trying to get 1 shot off every 2 minutes? So that profound fire rate could impact their losing the war.
And one more side note, the bayonet is actually, what it's coming at you is a triangle. That's intentional. And even in the Civil War as well, that technology didn't change. It was intentionally a triangle because you couldn't cover the wound. It was, once you had a wound from that bayonet, you couldn't cover the flap of skin. That's intentional. So you had to pierce the body, twist it, break the vacuum seal, and pull it out. And even Civil War soldiers were drilled with this triangle bayonet. And most people don't realize that, but that's intentional, because there's no flap of skin to cover the wound. That's essentially, that's, this rifle actually has grooves in the barrel. The Kentucky long rifle, it was actually developed like a quarterback's pass in football. If it's a spiral, okay, Josh Allen's going to throw it 50 yards on the field. If it's just kind of like a lame duck, like a ball coming down the barrel, it's not going to be as accurate as far. Okay, so the physics for the football is the same thing as the physics for a bullet or a shell shot. Question?
Yeah, I thought in the beginning they were saying that we didn't have bayonet capability.
No, we did. Yeah, we did. The long rifle does not have the capability of the bayonet. So that particular rifle, they usually attach a bayonet to it because it was a long-range gun. If you're using a long-range gun, you're not going to be as close to somebody in hand-to-hand combat. So if they use the muskets, like the British did, they would absolutely have the bayonets at the end. Absolutely.
And then with rifles also have pistols often as a backup.
That's a good question, yeah. So it depends on the arms, whether they attach the bayonet to it. Okay? Good question. The sniper rifle would be 200, 300 yards. The Civil War would be about 600 yards accuracy, so technology improved. It was very slow to reload though, because it took about a minute or two. So again, one shot, one kill from the rifle. We have some demonstration for you at the end of the day too. This was used effectively by Washington's army because Washington essentially said across the battlefield, so they got big shoulder boards, a big pipe that directs the troops, okay, kill him, because he's the officer. And that was, again, a shift in mentality of warfare. There's a randomness to the shoulder-to-shoulder, face-to-face. When the bullets come out, who knows where it's going to go? Now, you're hiding behind rocks and trees, very ungentlemanly, and you're picking out people across the battlefield to help win the war, the officers in charge. So that mindset is very, very different from the gentleman-style 18th century tactics. And Washington had to convince his officers to move with him. And this, once he started winning victories, it was actually more easy to convince people to go in the right direction. Yeah.
To add on to that as well, the British were trained to follow the general's orders. So if the man saying the orders is gone, the men are going to scatter. They're not going to be independent like the Americans and fight tooth and nail, bayonet, and hand combat. They're going to generally retreat because they don't know what orders are. They're not trained to take it.
Generally treat us funny. Generally treat. Come on, it's funny. Come on, it's funny. Okay. Generally treat. Okay. Once you get to one place to be. Here's some diagrams of the rifle. So again, once the hot lead melts a little bit, okay, it catches the grooves and starts spiraling down the barrel. So the Kentucky long rifle is accurate for a couple hundred yards. Civil War, the Enfield rifle, 600 yards. So it's really accurate. And the Enfield rifle in Civil War, with this, again, off topic, with this new technology, there was still shoulder-to-shoulder long lines. The tactics, even in the 1860s, didn't catch up with the new technology. So generals just threw people, and it was just piles of bodies. I mean, you know, so again, the generals are stuck in their old ways, and it never really changed that much with technology. Very interesting. All right, any questions? Okay. Gabriel, you or me? Me? Okay.
First set.
First. Okay. Left side? Okay. So the daily issue for the Continental soldier was about 1.5 pounds of meat per day. You just hope it wasn't full of maggots. And if it was, you'd be hungry enough to pick it out. Fat, bone, grizzle, whatever was there. There's no refrigeration, obviously. There's no dry dehydrations either. They have a 1 pound of camp baked bread or 1.5 pounds of flour to make it yourself. The fire cake, I've tasted this, it's awful. It's awful. Flour ration, water, meat, and grizzle, poured in a flat heated rock to cook. Thankfully, they used a stove at Old Fort Niagara, but it was awful. It was bad. It was not a really good cook. Maybe it's just boiled and head on. And you get 2 ounces a day of alcohol, and you mix it in a canteen. And the canteen was always exposed, even in the Civil War too, because if there's ever a stream or a creek and you're marching by it, you'd always kind of duck out, fill your canteen, and just come back in line. But
So in addition to war, we don't think about it today, but there were camp followers back in the Revolutionary War, and if we're considering why would women and children follow men into war, in this case, obviously, it's because we would want to leave your family behind for the British to capture. God knows what happened to them. So the idea was not only are they going to help the war and the men on the front lines by washing clothes, nursing, laundry, they also have the Hessians, obviously, as well for their service. But obviously, the men would be able to protect their wives as well in the army compared to leaving them behind on the farm or homestead, which could be, again, pillaged, burned, or something could happen if they were not able to work. So it was sustainable. It was a dual system in the war, trying to help balance duties while also keeping up fighting the British.
Please remember too, that these patriots fighting against the British were considered traitors. And, you know, if your family or you were caught, there was a real possibility you could be hanged, including the sign of the Declaration of Independence. Okay? I think one of the phrases of Franklin was, we don't, hang together, we'll assuredly hang separately. So that's why some women actually maintain the family with their husbands as they're marching off the war. The women actually played a vital role in cooking, cleaning, and laundry, and daily duties, and keep morale up too. There's ink rations as well. Any questions? Okay. Next.
So looking at the fire rate again, we briefly talked about again how important was the fire fast. So this is kind of broken apart in a metronome type graph here. So the amount of seconds, 15 seconds to fire one shot would put Lacey in a different category. So you should be able to at least fire 4 rounds per minute. Again, a lot of farmers were still able to meet the standard of the British Army. Okay, the elite, we look at the Hessians, the German, the elite soldiers, those would be specialized units. Those guys were called in, and if they were in battle, they would be the elite that's considered here, firing faster per second. And obviously the Hessians were used sparingly, but when they were called in, generally you could expect them to win on behalf of the British. And again, the cost of this, we briefly talked about this again, but the amount of hours of training you can't make up for 10 years of serving the British Army with a farmer who just picked up a gun a month ago. So the type of experience in rifle fire would again make a break down.
This is the side story about the Hessian troops. They're from Hesse, Germany, and the Prince of Hesse would receive compensation not only for the troops being sent, but if a German soldier actually died in the war, the German prince as well as the Hessian soldier's family would receive compensation. They were hired mercenaries. And that's someone's going to talk about the Battle of Trenton, and that's who we captured. So the German Hessian soldiers were actually just the most ruthless, ungenerally, soldiers you could find at this time, and they were terrifying to fight. And the fact that we actually did this and fought and beat them at the Battle of Trenton, incredible. Absolutely good.
In order to practice all that amount of time, they weren't using live powder and stuff, were they? Were?
Yeah.
They didn't have blanks, no, they would fire. So ammunition was in one charge.
So they
Yeah.
wasted all that ammo.
There'd be gunpowder, but no bullets.
Okay.
Okay. And the training not only is repetition, but also focus and concentration. So if you've got a long line here, it's easier to load rapidly when you're focused on your task. So if you can practice with distractions and the noise and the explosions and the smells, it's going to be better for you. So yes, they would actually use gunpowder, but not the actual musket ball. Yes.
Did they have to swab between like every 10 rounds or like?
No, they didn't. They didn't have
Black
to go
powder
through
or gunpowder?
black powder. Yeah. The cannons did, absolutely.
Was the swabbing because of the sparks, the leftover sparks? Is that why the swabbing?
Yeah, the cannons did that, but there wasn't any danger of that with muskets. That's a good question. I don't know why. I don't know if it's the volume, or
Well, I
the,
know like I'm a muzzleloader hunter, so like every 7 shots, you gotta scrape your barrel.
oh, scraping, absolutely, yes, yes.
Like even the fireman chamber, like with flint locks, like that sparks, especially if you're using black powder to ignite the load.
Right.
That's gonna gum up that.
Yes.
Channel. Must
So,
have to clean that.
yes, I think you're right. They would clean it, but they wouldn't necessarily, like the artillery, for example, would wet, like a Q-tip essentially, and throw it down the barrel.
And dry it.
But yeah, they wouldn't do that for muscle, but they would actually have to clean it, absolutely, 100%, yeah. Okay. Well, that's a good question. What do you hunt, by the way? Deer? Not for the deer, of course, but. Puppy. camp was a series of contradictions, okay? The elite, the most effective, the disciplined regiments, the Continental Army hailed from Virginia, Maryland, and Pennsylvania. It also integrated itself. Congress was petitioned by General James Mitchell Barnum, having Americans openly serve in the ranks and fighting units were now integrated, which is very unusual back then, because obviously there was slavery and racism was still there in America, but the integrated units were there, so the three of them actually fought side by side. And it wasn't repeated until the Korean War in 1950. It's very interesting. It was a long time to get back to where we should be. And Rhode Island Rhode Island Regiment was actually an entire African American infantry regiment from freedom. They were lived in Providence. They were now for their service. And the British offered freedom for any enslaved persons who would join their ranks and fight against the Americans too. As a matter of fact, Patrick Henry, Liberty Death speech, he said, "Give me liberty, give me death." He actually had patrols out in Virginia, making sure that any of the slaves were not going to join the British Army. So it's kind of ironic how give me liberty, give me death is keeping the slaves, in chains from joining the British, which is very, very contradictory. All right, next one.
So again, the American Army, they're looking at crime and punishment. How do you keep 15 to 30-year-olds in line? Obviously, they're not used to military law, staying in order, listening to commands. So obviously, there would be severe punishment. There would be these draconian military laws. It would be very physical, like from lashes to finish physical punishments or isolation. We also had in the next box here. So if you didn't go to the bathroom, essentially, where you're supposed to, the vaults, as they're called, to keep some sanitary conditions. Because back then, they did not have proper hygiene. You could actually be executed for that or other harsh punishments, especially if you try to conserve. So there was a lot of different ways we try to keep men in line, especially all the way until the French decided to help us, which had more command and disciplinary tactics.
Any questions? You gotta poop at the right spot, otherwise the person behind you be drinking the same water. It's not cool.
Back to your point about the Rhode Island, the
Yes.
integration. When was Dunmore's proclamation? Was that right before the Declaration? Because
That's a good. I don't know.
I believe one of the grievances in the Declaration
Yes.
concerned the fact, or their position, that Britain was interfering in matters by persuading African Americans to fight for them.
Yes.
I think that was from Dunmore's proclamation, which was before that.
Yes, it was. Yeah, that's before the Revolutionary War. It took a long time, obviously, to get the thinking correct. But once people started realizing that they were people and they were willing to fight for America, even Hamilton, bought and sold slaves for his in-laws. He actually was up with. You got to understand the complexity of this too. Hamilton had similar views to many founding fathers. They were going to allow slaves to be free, fighting for the Americans, but they weren't seeing Africans essentially as people. They were just trying to get America and win their independence. So the motivation, the hope was love. Like, oh, these are people who deserve to be treated with respect and citizenship and rights and privileges. But in reality, though, they were allowed to fight because we needed soldiers. And then that's the reality of it. The rationale behind immigration was not always benevolent. It was just a means to an end, essentially. Make sense?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So that's a great question. The rationale motivation behind the immigration was we got to have soldiers to fight against the British. It wasn't so that African Americans could gain freedom. We weren't there yet.
On the other side, too, the British did promise freedom to American slaves, African slaves, which also was hopefully trying to start a revolt and uprising, especially in the South, where other slaves were. And there were some small cases where the British did take different African Americans back to Britain, but it was very rare. So a lot of people served for the British were abandoned, even if they did fight the war for the British.
Any questions?
Yes.
So that seems sort of similar to the position that they had with the Indians in New York.
Yeah.
The British had the Indians working with them against us, and we had some tribes that were working with us against the British, but after the war, then they were given freedom.
Exactly. Yeah. That's exactly right. It's a darker tried to get them as best they could to the perfection of the British and the professionalism that they had. And not only did they have that kind of soldier training, but also soldier mentality, that we can do this, you know, so with a ragtag, you know, well-organized army, and then von Steuben really got them into shape, taught them how to fight. And then once they realized how the British were fighting, they used that to their advantage. And so, okay, this is how the British are gonna fight us, now we're gonna, the generals and colonels are gonna decide how to use that information to our advantage.
How did Washington get here? Was he a former Hessian?
No, I'm not, you know, I'm not sure about that one. I think he just came over as a German immigrant.
Okay.
And I don't know if he had a beef with the British, I'm not really sure. But,
And I think he had a beef with his army involved in promotion.
yeah, something over
And then
there.
he came over.
Yeah, he had some kind of argument, and he had a problem with somebody, and he said, I'm going to other team. Okay?
Thank you.
Yeah, that's a good question. Yeah, Lafayette was the same way. He was actually the connection with the French. After this, you know, Saratoga, the turning point, the French believed in us. Said, here's your stuff. Here's weapons. You know, the French just lost the French Indian War and all the colonies from that world conflict. So now an opportunity to, you know, what else is that? Lafayette. Thank you. Glad you're here. So with Lafayette and Steuben, we definitely had some outside influences that really changed the outcome of the war.
Well,
Yeah.
at the time of that too, Washington himself was denied promotion with the British after the 7 Years' War, so that helped turn his mind to joining the Americans and fighting against the British for some personal motivation as well, keeping the farmland, trying to make a better name for himself.
Yeah, we're good? Any other questions? Thank you. The questions are great. Those people's coming.
So again, talking about sanitation and whatnot, like Jason said, you know, not going to the bathroom where you drink, stuff like that, that today makes sense. Back then, nobody knew better, and that's why discipline was a huge issue. The mortality rate came down to disease. Again, when you think about how the British, different people from Europe, different parts of the Americas were coming together, people were obviously spreading disease, getting sick, and being huddled together armies, not showering, not being able to obviously have vaccines, certain modern medicine and technology. If you had any small illness or sickness, it could kill you. The fever could kill you. Small stuff today would be deadly back then. So the graph here is showing that for every one death in combat, if you get hit by a smoothbore or a rifle bullet, 9 other men were dying by disease. So more so, men were dying actually in medical tents rather than dying out on the grass fields.
The destruction of the bullets, the mini balls, actually led to more severe wounds. The bayonet, for example, the speed of the soft lead going through you. I talked to surgeons even today that the military wounds back then would be very hard to repair. In Civil War II, once a bullet hits any part of your body, any limb, extremity, you have a better chance of surviving, but the limb's gone. And back then, with the surgery, it was not successful usually, with all the different germs and infections and diseases. Okay? Yeah, and then this improved a little bit since the Civil War. Yeah.
Are deaths from wounds factored into the disease deaths?
Are what?
People
Yes,
die
yeah,
of their
disease
wounds,
wounds.
those factored in. Okay, so it wasn't just sanitation, it was also.
So moving opened up to more
Not
diseases.
infected.
Yeah.
And part of that tied to using the same, not even proper scalpels or tools that we think of today, but the same type of saws or knives to cut somebody or to cut off a limb and amputate them. Those are being shared between different people, so you're literally getting sick to another person in a lot of cases, even if you were healthy.
Does this factor in with the British Army also?
Yes.
They were losing as many
Yep.
men to disease
Yes.
as like colonists.
So as the bullet wounds get closer to the trunk of the body, obviously the greater mortality rate. So if you didn't die instantly in the battlefield, as the bullet wound gets closer to your chest, more likely you are going to die. Okay, if you hit in the hand, obviously you got a better chance of surviving than getting hit in the shoulder. Okay?
You also had mothers and wives usually as the surgeons trying to help you rather than professionals and medical people. It wasn't the same.
Surgeons didn't really show up until Civil War. That's a good point too. Okay, what's this one? Me? Okay. Any questions? Catalyst, crisis of supply. if you don't feed your army, I mean, the policeman said, our army moves on the stomach. If you don't feed your army, you don't have supplies, we're gonna have a real problem, okay? And the Continental Congress had no money to buy stuff. The French did not get involved in the conflict until much later after Saratoga. So many soldiers starved, froze to death, died of terrible diseases because of lack of medicine, just because of lack of political support and funding. In Washington, I mean, many letters through the Continental Congress begging, pleading for help, for finances, for supplies, for food, equipment, medicine, bandages, everything. This lack of supplies then pushed the Continental Army to the brink of desertion. Okay, in these conditions now, where you're not getting support and help from the Congress that you're fighting for, put a mental toll on the American soldiers. Okay, the mutinies, desertions frequently happen. That's why you have the draconian codes and measurements that Diego was talking about earlier. And once we became our own country, we beat the British. Those soldiers helped to form a government now that really focused on the army and treating people well, providing them welfare. Okay? And these core arguments created the Constitution. Because your people were taken care of, the rights of blood for property, common welfare being provided. That lack of caritas during the war led to a better government for all of us. We've done one of mistakes.
Thank you.
Good. Any questions?
Is that primarily because we just couldn't fund it? I mean,
Exactly, yeah.
I'm sure they wanted to.
Yes, exactly. I mean, we couldn't print out money because
There
we
was
wanted
no
it.
tax code or,
No.
you know,
There's no money system.
yeah.
People, I mean, generally speaking, they thought America was going to fail. So why would you want American money? Essential. Yeah. Okay. So now we're going to move to two different battles of how we actually beat the British at their own game. Okay? You want to read the slide?
So the tactical destruction we're looking at.
What? Okay, so asymmetric victory. This is going to be one of the battles at Cowpens. The American strategy and the British strategy will be the first couple of videos coming up. And then we'll get into the Battle of Cowpens and the Battle of Yorktown. So now, that is the Treaty of Paris, the painting. And on the bottom right corner, the British officials who signed the treaty and surrendered the colonies were so embarrassed they didn't want to sit with the picture. Okay, they didn't want to be immortalized forever with that humiliation. Okay. So here we go. We're going to get into some of the particulars of the battles and strategies.
So the continental side of the strategy was obviously the British their strength is on water, our strength is on land. How can we keep drawing them more and more into the land, the geographics? So there's more farmers, obviously more men could rise up. Also the army has the geographical advantage, especially when we implement guerrilla warfare tactics. So drawing the British further and further, cutting off their supply lines will be advantage toward the Americans. And again, as the videos discussed, like in Philadelphia, Boston, these different cities from Americans was just taking the city. As long as the army survived, as long as America still had a heartbeat, we could keep fighting on their day. So the British thinking that they would win headlines in newspapers really were being drawn out to a war they'd eventually lose.
And you know, in Washington, the last battle is the only battle we have to win. As long as we don't get caught, okay, they get hit and run and just take and move and keep going. Eventually, the British is going to give up. That's their strategy. 2,000 miles away, expensive war already with France. The French and Indian Wars only fought not only in North America but all over the world. So they're already heavily in depth in that World War. They don't want to get drawn out in war, obviously. So as long as we can hang out and not get captured, that's critical. The British overestimated their strengths, and they overestimated, as the video talked about, the loyal support. The divide and conquer did not work at all, because once they invaded the city, for example, in order to keep and occupy the city, the army moving out to take the next city would be weaker. And that strategy is not going to work. Okay, so capture New York City, you got some troops there to keep and maintain conquered cities. If you move down to Philadelphia, your army eventually gets weaker. Then you move down to Virginia, and Jamestown, the army was subsequently get weaker as you move either north or south, depending on which way they were moving. So in order to keep and hold the land, the soldiers had to be in the spot you were before, which makes your previous army that you're working with now moving out a lot weaker. And eventually the numbers weren't there. Coastal blockades didn't work, especially with the French coming down on our side after Saratoga, and they tried to divide and conquer New England from the middle, and some encounters with Battle of Saratoga, conquering the Hudson River Valley, but they didn't work. So the strategy was sound until they put it into practice. Any questions? Okay. Ready? Yes? Okay. So we're going across here, right? The rebellion was driven by a small localized fraction. That's what the British erroneously thought. The reality was America had unmatched intensity of feelings, the ones who were fighting. Again, a third of the population of America was in favor of breaking away. A third of the population wanted to stay loyal to the British crown, and a third were kind of on the fence and where to go. But the third of the population that wanted to be Americans in their own country, they were passionate. They were willing to fight for that cause. And the consequence, it wasn't just a New England effort, it was actually spread then throughout the colonies. Because if the British could close down Boston, for example, or if they can treat New England this way, they can do it to any colony, any city. So that passion intensity spread from New England to the other colonies as well. Gabriel?
So the British believing that they could destroy armies was a past tactic. The Americans, again, are, it's like whack-a-mole, we're very resilient, we're going to keep fighting. So even though one army or one division was shattered, men would regroup, reinforce other units, try to rejoin the fight and stay in the battle with American freedom and ideals. And this led to obviously the British not being able to achieve their goals of having a definitive knockout blow, defeating an army without capturing one of our leaders or generals. It was almost a pure victory. They could win smaller battles, but over time we were hoping to win the wars.
Who's got a question?
Yeah, okay, yes, sir.
All right, so the British did this coastal blockade on the way down, right?
They tried, they could. There was, yeah, okay.
Well, first of all, I don't know why they did that, because if they had just blockaded New York, Massachusetts, and Maryland, those were the main cities. But they went down south, sent their Navy down there. Then those men had to bring all that stuff, hundreds of miles. And all you had to do was put a few troops up there to stall and fight them. The British just wasted your time.
I think everyone around Washington was in charge.
Yeah, and you're right. And this was talking earlier is that every step you take, you leave a man behind.
Right.
So you take everybody behind, and then the Americans will just rush in and take back the city. And eventually you just run out of men. Going from Boston, they evacuated Boston, New York City, then you got Philadelphia, then Charleston, and Savannah. I mean, there's just there's thousands of miles to go. So even if you grab the city, there were so many ways the British troops could not stop French supplies from coming in. Because beyond just the inlets, local, knowledge, the cities were the only place to get, the supplies they needed too. So shutting down the cities, stopping the trade either.
We also had smuggle routes, which before the war started, that's how we maintained our weapons coming from Europe. We didn't manufacture our first weapons. So we still had routes the British were not able to obviously stop. And with the French helping, supporting us, opened up actually more avenues. The Americans were smarter than using cities as German ports, because if they did fall, which they did, obviously that would have been a huge loss of ammunition and communications.
Where were we getting our gunpowder and all that stuff from along the way?
Generally France and other allies,
So
Spain.
at the beginning,
We were making it.
We had our own, we had British supplies initially too that we were able to keep before the war officially opened up to start. That was kind of an advantage as well.
We were British colonies. We were fighting the French.
Right.
So a lot of those arms were still in the colonies too. That's a good question.
To reiterate a little bit of what Gabriel was saying about the resiliency, and it got me to thinking, I just looked it up because I remembered something about Nathaniel Greene and American resiliency.
We're going to talk about him.
Oh, can I say, his quote, Nathaniel Greene, we fight, get beat, rise, and fight again. That was Nathaniel Greene, and that demonstrates what we're talking about.
Absolutely, yes. As long as, we can lose every battle of the last
Right,
one, okay? And as long as we get caught, we have a chance.
as long as our soldiers kept moving forward.
Yes. Yeah.
That was Britain's Vietnam.
And Britain did not adapt their tactics and strategy to our resiliency.
Right.
But, yes, sir.
To Glenn's point, there's a guy down south called Francis Marion.
Yeah.
And Francis was the swamp rat. He
Yes.
used to fight a different swamp.
Yeah.
And he would wait till they took over a town and then he'd pick them off. He'd
Yes,
just literally run around. And that was his whole job during the war. He would take these groups and bands of soldiers
Yes.
and they would just recapture
And
whatever they got.
our knowledge of the town and the streets,
Oh, yeah.
yeah, I mean, you know, so that knowledge gives us power, absolutely.
We had a huge spy network too, there's a bunch of documentaries and books about it, but we had internal knowledge from the British themselves and other men, and general civilians as well, who would pretend to be British obviously, and smuggle information to the Americans, generally in coffee houses or people where they're gathering, it's an easy way to find information.
You guys ever seen the movie Hamilton, the musical Hamilton? Hercules Mulligan was one of the famous spies.
This strategy sort of reminds me of what happened in Vietnam.
Yes.
In reverse.
Yeah, exactly, yep. 100%.
Why did it take us so long to start taking off their horsemen, their generals and their colonels and stuff? I mean, even though it wasn't proper way to fight,
Yes.
I mean, we weren't there to fight the right way, we were there for a purpose.
Well, simply to answer your question, is that when we started losing the other way, Washington said we gotta switch this up.
Right.
I mean, that essentially, we tried to fight the British.
And how long did that take before we shot their first?
Well, that's a good question, I have no idea. I'm thinking
Do you
that
remember
once.
that, Glenn?
We started as early as Concord.
That's what
Yes,
I'm
that's what
saying.
I'm saying.
I'm sorry, what was it?
As early as Lexington, well, not Lexington, but Concord,
Concord,
and
okay.
Bannock Road.
Yeah, the march back, lost it. But no, again, there wasn't a regular army, it was a more militia.
Correct, yeah.
I think our regular army started shifting once we lost New York City. That's my general feeling.
So it was that late?
Yes, yeah.
Okay.
So Battle of Trenton, okay, New Jersey, we
Yeah.
lost Delaware twice. He moved on Christmas Eve and attacked Christmas morning.
Right,
That's, for me, a significant shift. And the officers,
we're ready for it.
yeah, no, the American officers weren't ready for it either. How dare you spill blood on one of the holiest Christian days of the calendar? You know, God's gonna punish us, you know, but then it worked. Washington essentially said nicely, shut up, sit down, and do the work.
Right.
In the movie The Patriot, it was, that showed exactly when he said to his kids, shoot, look for officers, shoot the officers
Yeah,
first.
yeah.
Right.
Yeah, without the head.
Right.
I read that Paul Revere put together an outfit somewhere in Massachusetts and they have actual gunpowder.
Yeah, yeah. He was a silversmith too. So he did all the metallurgy and, yeah. All right, we have number 3. Thank you. So the British believed that there was going to be a massive loyalist uprising and support the British. Even though a third of the population were loyalists, they weren't really ready to fight their own allies, their own neighbors. So that was a big assumption of the British. And a lot of the back roads, the back countries, and flanks were exposed as a result. And there were disasters of these in the South.
Weren't the loyalists mostly wealthy?
Not necessarily. No. I mean, you could say that some were, especially in the larger cities. I guess the power came from the British, through trade, economics, and politics.
They're afraid to lose everything.
Exactly, yes. But there's some in the South, though, they pride themselves on being British. They were Anglican, they had the same fashion trends I mentioned earlier, they worshiped the same God, they had the same songs and dances. So yeah, the South were more of a mix.
So the loyalists that chose to, they basically like a militia, or they just handed them a gun and said, well,
Yes, essentially, yeah, they're very similar, yes. So they weren't part of the actual regular British forces, but they certainly were there to help. And the video of the conference will show you that the British actually had, it's like before this one too, they had that militia soldiers, let's say regular, but not really, I won't use the term, but, they weren't the normal drill professional soldiers for a lifetime. They did take the what they can, yeah. And sometimes the British generals would not allow them to help, because they wanted that lifetime commitment, that hour, 8-hour drill day soldier. So if they did have any militia in the South or loyalists, they put them in front lines, usually. Yes, sir. That's your question.
How much of the loyalist overestimation was like an effect of insurgency? Say like the British doing like the Patriot thing, burning
No.
that church and creating that piece.
No, there wasn't, I mean, the British did not regularly accept loyalists into their army because they were professional soldiers with a lifetime commitment. They used the loyalists for other support, as far as knowledge, information, you know.
Yeah, that's what I mean, like losing that because of their treatment of like everyone here.
Right, sorry.
Like losing the support of all the population because of their treatment of the commons.
And I think the loyalists, they truly believe they want to be British, and they pride themselves on being British, as I have a personal opinion from what I've read, different historians. But they weren't, you know, they weren't integrated into the British Army. They were just support for intelligence, for scouting missions, for supplies, that kind of thing. So in other words, I don't think the British is as effective.
And you're comfortable with the devil that you know.
Yes, exactly, yeah.
So they're well.
And this is a huge risk, yeah. I mean, the Patriots are a huge risk. I mean, if you are captured in the battlefield, for example, I mean, who knows what happens, right? The British and the Patriots are great. I mean, eventually. You know, so I mean, it's a huge risk to fight. So if you're gonna fight, step up. You're gonna have a purpose. You're gonna have intention. You're gonna be motivated, and you reverse something on the battlefield as a result. That's a very good point. Okay. You were me next.
Sorry, so looking at logistical models, again, the British usually had a hub where ammunition, supplies were, and they'd be able to coordinate that as a standard way of them facilitating or moving ammunition, men, and orders. Obviously, being now all the way in the colonies, different communication lines were cut off. People would obviously be spies. People would obviously try to betray the British for it. The British had good routes or lines. A lot of times, the Americans were able to adapt, again, to guerrilla warfare. So their tactics, especially when it comes to moving supplies, moving further into American territories, they could lose this supply, that they lose a battle. So there was a logistical nightmare essentially of how much you move, where you move it, you trust these sources, and compounding all of this would lead to eventually tired soldiers and then supply shortages. Most times the British would try to actually pillage a town or a farm, take whatever goods they could. Americans would do this sometimes too, but it was more rare. The British would obviously be more violent, try to burn what they could to avoid Americans from retaking it. So that also could create some animosity between the British or possible loyalists or Americans in the area. The supplies is a big issue again, because they depend on the meeting.
Questions? Okay. So now we're going to get into more strategies now, and we'll eventually get into Calpens and Yorktown. Okay? You or me? Me? Okay. The gentleman's way, and we're going to do this, obviously, in demonstration at the end of the presentation tonight. But you'll have shoulder to shoulder, 2 or 3 ranks. You have specialized troops on either flank, left and right. You have some horses in reserve, the cavalry. Because of the technology and the accuracy, you need to have shoulder to shoulder long lines, volume fire, aim somewhere over there, hopefully it hits something, okay? That's generally the battle. I fire, you fire, we fire, you fire, and then you run away, I win. And that's basically the British strategy. Old technology, these older styles of battle, gentleman's warfare. You're not going to duck. Actually, from what I understand, you can actually see a bullet or a cannonball coming at you, and as a gentleman, you're not ducking. Okay? I mean, and if you go down, you next guy up, you got to step in. Okay? And,
Guy up gets in the head.
Louis is no gentleman.
yeah. So that's how they were trained. Like they just follow orders, they just march, they drill 8 steps to load the rifle, and just follow orders. And yeah, they can't duck, they ain't high rank trees, it's very gentlemen being a professional.
Why didn't the British just figure that out? I mean,
Again,
stand there and get shot. I
Yeah,
mean,
that was
Right.
the tradition back then.
Yeah.
And they just got so caught up into one way of thinking that they just couldn't adapt and respond.
Your honor would be, you'd be dishonored.
Yeah, exactly.
If you did survive and we died, you would.
Yeah, you ostracized.
Yeah, but you're saying we had 15-year-olds, like, they're all Yahoo. I mean, I don't understand how they kept them in such regiments.
Yeah, I got 12-year-olds in my classroom, I have no idea.
Right.
Like herding cats, I have no idea.
That's what they
Seriously, I mean,
Yeah.
how did they keep them in control? And
Well, draconian measures. And if you poop in the wrong place, you get shot. That's pretty good motivation to do what you're told. Right? Yeah, that's what. Yeah. Okay, so
you're right.
Washington tried this gentleman's strategy and realized we're not going to win. Gabriel, go.
So looking at their colonial tactics, they did more of tiered lines, so they would try to again draw the British in and then pick them off slowly and exhausting them. So the British were generally moving towards the colonial army, going across fields of land, losing men, losing their supply chain, and as the imagery depicts, either the first line would hold, or if they needed to, they would fall back a second or third time, but generally the Americans would always hold, and they'd be able to, obviously, with reserves, we'll look at different cavalry measures, be able to sustain most battles. So exhausting the British, cutting off supplies would be a substantial advantage.
Lou's got another question.
Yes, go ahead.
Okay.
Loud.
Going back to your logistics, right?
Yes.
Now, common sense would tell you, if you were a logistics guy, wouldn't you want to know the lay of the land where you're going to send these goods? Didn't Britain ever get this?
No.
They just.
Thankfully, because we'd be speaking English right now.
Who do they think we have, roads?
I'm sorry, I was thinking.
Do you actually think that there were roads here, and there weren't mountains, snow?
Yeah, and honestly, that lag, first of all, I think there's part of British arrogance to this too. With when professional soldiers, red coats, they're gonna see us coming from across the battlefield, they're gonna run, because they're just part-time soldiers. So, all of that, I believe, is part of the British non-thinking, okay?
So it was arrogance.
Yeah, their traditions, they're the best soldiers, the highest trained, and the American army, as J.Lo mentioned in the previous slide, is just gonna scatter and run. And we did, but we didn't get captured. So it was all that as part of the British generals, they just didn't, the thinking wasn't there. You're right.
Should have just ambushed them.
Yeah.
Well, part of what Jason's saying too is a big part of it, they wore red coats. So an officer on a horse with red horse, on a horse with a red jacket looks like a shiny ornament sitting out in the open. So people in trees are able to obviously pick them off with ease, especially if they're expert riflemen and huntsmen. So this is just picking off something in the field, and then obviously they're going to retreat if they have no commander. So all this kind of ties together to the arrogance of the British, but also the ability for the Americans to adapt.
Great question. Not just on horses, but also the ornaments, the shoulder boards, the high hats, the pikes that we direct the troops. All that. Yeah.
Let me be the one to, first of all, it's great, everything good, keep going. These guys, there'll be a mutiny, there's a hard stop at 8:30.
Yeah.
You still got 45
Yeah,
minutes.
okay,
I just wanted to give the heads up.
Okay, we're about halfway through.
Because with,
We're about halfway through.
And we know the logistics of that, so be careful.
Oh, thank you for that.
I just wanted to get a heads up.
Okay.
I mean, I'm good with it, but this guy over here.
Everyone be a run to the back.
Revolt is a dangerous
Okay.
thing.
We will definitely make sure the game's highest priority. Yes.
Well,
This one?
So the British, like the video was alluding to and talking about directly, so they're trying to take ports and different sea routes, obviously maintain their navy and try to create different expansion trade routes and communication lines. So here at Charleston and Camden down south, they changed their strategy again. They always focused on big cities. Americans obviously would try to hold those different lines, but it was not the breaking point of the war.
And if they have a counter strategy, you'll see this in the next video on Battle of Cowpens. We knew how the British were going to fight. Long lines coming at you, and then eventually, though, they get tired. Okay? We retreat intentionally, and then they keep going. Then we retreat intentionally again, and then we attack them point blank range, and then eventually, after 500 yards of marching through volley of fire, we can overcome their attack. Okay? We might retreat off the battlefield, but as Gabriel mentioned, a Pyrrhic victory. hollow victory. That they might have the land and the territory, but they lost more than half their army, they can't pursue us, they can't go after us. And by the way, the last slide too, I will go back real quick, I didn't have 45 minutes, but you got the Ben Scuban, we got you, at Valley Forge, okay?
Why do they call it Fabian? Is it?
It's a, I think Fabian was an actual Roman general. You got it right? Yeah, I'm gonna skip these ones, okay? Okay. Now, this is a previous slide, and I'm used to doing this with 12-year-olds, so I need some cooperation.
Well, you have a lot of mentality.
I'm just throwing it out there, because you guys are, so, we're not gonna clear the floor, this is too much furniture. The idea is, we want you to form two lines up to the sides, like one through this way and one through this way, okay? What?
Let's do smaller lines here.
Well, maybe, no, there's a lot of people here, maybe we can do this one, aisles here, is that okay? And then what we're gonna do is, shoulder to shoulder, face to face, shoulder to shoulder, face to face, and Gabriel prepared some musket balls and some sniper fire. So I want to show you guys how different the technology is. Okay? What we want to make sure we do is
Have line over there.
what we want to do
Take
is
you on it.
okay. This is a gentleman's engagement. Okay, if we follow orders, stay in your line. Use some common sense here and have some fun.
That's mine, Sean. What are you, a loyalist?
Say it first. Paul.
I got rocks in mine, Sean.
So we're not supposed to.
The gentleman's work.
We're not supposed to conform them anymore.
Down, see on that side, he's not even getting near you.
Freaking, Johnny's gonna be pissed when he's gotta clean these up.
Hang on.
I'm his back. I'm in reserve.
Come on, Glenn, get up front.
Let's get in the middle.
Glenn, you got Johnny coming in to clean this up tomorrow?
Pass that back.
He's with us. Okay. Gentlemen, I want to just, again, go through this with you to make sure we are absolutely
Everybody throw him that loo.
hang on. Listen, today, we're gonna try this two lines, shoulder to shoulder, face to face across the battlefield, okay? We're not gonna determine which side is which until we see who wins. So no pressure. This is a gentleman's conflict. So Gabriel's gonna be the officer on this side, I'll be the officer over here. I will give the order to lower, which means you can actually start packing tighter. Not yet, and this is the order yet. Okay. We're gonna stay in lines, we're gonna stay in lines. We're gonna use common sense. If this is coming at you, obviously, we don't want anyone, ducking. Gentleman's conflict.
No ducking.
Okay, so no ducking.
No running, no running.
Common sense, right? And we're gonna have fun. I promise Glenn to put this up on the board here.
Can't bet.
We're gonna restore the room later. So we're throwing each other now, we're responsible to clean up. Just have to know. Okay? So, what we're trying to do now is demonstrate the difference between the smooth bore versus the rifle. So we got some paper airplanes in a separate bag. So a few of you who are gonna be snipers are gonna have the rifles. Everyone now has got 3 shots. Okay, we're gonna follow orders, okay? And we're gonna make sure we understand how, because you guys already said, we're not gonna get that far, right?
Right.
So that's the goal here. So that, I got some music here. Just increase the level of intensity of the Alright, everybody, you ready to go? Did you order your men to load? Done with load?
Alright, you guys load, crumple up the balls. Are you gonna fire first?
One at a time. We'll wait one shot at a time.
Want to fire at the same time or one at a time?
We'll fire.
One side at a time?
Is it one side at a time? You guys want to go first?
Why not?
Okay, let's go. You guys fire.
Fire, guy!
Fire!
Second time.
Fire! Thank God we throw like a
Fire! Done! Now.
Leave Sean's arm off.
Last one, fire!
How many do we have?
Now, let's take a moment here. How did that work out your fight, man?
He had four.
Now,
John, he had four.
now,
Pick it back up again.
gentlemen. Oh, yeah, they're in the middle, but it's okay. Alright. So listen. Generally speaking, how did that go? Were you aiming at the target? Did you get the target?
I had one target.
1 out of 3, right?
Yeah, 1 out of 3 or 4, yeah.
One sniper rifle. And then this is what you guys can do.
There's one.
Do you have your students do these?
Yes.
Did you
Yeah.
really?
Yes.
I remember making it.
Oh, it's fantastic.
Everybody got an airplane?
You guys are trouble, right?
Two people did all that. So, gentlemen, knowing that we have more time up here, more rounds, but you get the idea the smoothbore not necessarily accurate. Okay? With Gabriel's order, you guys can fly try to aim at its target. If someone's going to catch your eyes, obviously please stop. Okay, the gentleman's stuff's going to go out the window. It's going to win.
They fire first?
It's a rifle.
Yeah, rifle fire.
Ready?
Fire!
Fire!
Oh! I got a date!
Rifle.
This is Butcher Dave. I won't be in tomorrow. I lost the leg.
Okay. Is that more accurate?
Yeah.
Okay. So rifle fire, I think that's the whole goal. Okay. So now I need your help. Please pick up the balls and the paper airplanes. Please return to your seats once we get the place cleaned out the way. One more
You got airplanes?
slide to go through.
He's walking around when they got one.
The battle's over!
Oh, that battle is over!
Hey, this is gonna get
And you thought your 12-year-old would do it.
We gotta slide back to the, yes, I know.
Yeah, right. Yeah, right. I got it. You can't throw anymore. You got a headshot.
Well, you gotta calm down.
Our old guys were throwing
Where's come from?
Here's another one. Here.
There you go.
So does that bring us to?
You got the grenade. Yeah.
Any more balls?
All right, one more slide, guys, to bring it to a.
There you go.
Hey, Mark, somebody sit there.
The other Mark.
Yeah, the other Mark.
Yeah, one second.
There you go. Stay right here.
Okay, on the back.
Gabriel. Anybody left any questions or anything?
Next time, come with a headset.
Yeah, we're gonna get a bigger microphone, better than a big.
Yeah.
This is
Good
That
job,
was fun,
fellas.
though.
Any questions, Gabriel? Anything you want to add?
Do you have any questions for
You
us?
guys did a great job. Thank you so
Hey guys,
much.
give him a big round, give him a big round of applause. And obviously, we welcome you back at any time, on any topic, because that was great. So just let me know, and we'll do that. Thank you, guys. Appreciate it.